Happy Hanukkah, Bill.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah. First night of Hanukkah tonight. I need to get on my annual donut making.
Darn right.
I've not
That's what I'm talking about.
I've not set a date for donuts yet, but that has to happen soon, as well as latkes.
Yes, I saw that there's some controversy over what to put on latkes. There's like, I guess, two things. Like one is
Sour
applesauce,
cream or
maybe.
applesauce?
What's the other one?
Applesauce.
And
Sour cream.
okay, and what is the Scher family on this?
I don't like sour cream, so I tend not to. And my kids aren't big sour cream fans. I think my wife would definitely put sour cream on it. I don't think any of them put applesauce on it. I think they just have them straight or with ketchup, which I'm sure is sacrilegious.
When I was like 12 years old, my mom was like a nanny for a Jewish cardiologist
Hmm.
in Frederick, Maryland, and he invited us over to his house one night
Yeah.
for Hanukkah, and we had latkes. It was a really cool experience. I don't, and I liked them. I don't think there was any topping but I feel like I would be a sour cream
Hmm.
guy if push came to shove.
Yeah. Um, I mean, as far as like holiday foods go, donuts and latkes is really strong. It's really hard. Like the main thing of Thanksgiving, the big turkey, turkey. Who gets that excited about turkey? Sides you get excited about. Like latkes a good side. Donuts solid dessert.
Yeah, I think that Adam Sandler just tweeted out his Hanukkah song, and I think in the preamble of that, he
Mhm.
talks about there's a lot of Christian kids have a lot of stuff and a lot of
Yeah.
songs,
Yeah.
but there needs to be a Jewish song, and so I think it comes to music, Christmas definitely wins the day. Um, Although I do think that Bare Naked Ladies album, sort of covers a lot of ground. But when it comes to food, I think I'm going to go with you, Bill. I think latkes and donuts are kind of hard to beat.
That's right. Um, I'm not a huge fan of the Adam Sandler Hanukkah song because it's not a Hanukkah song. It's not about Hanukkah in any way. It's a list of Jewish celebrities and that's it.
Yeah. Uh, Rod Carew.
I mean, it's a funny song about people you didn't realize were Jewish, but like there are some good Hanukkah songs out there. They're harder to find. They're not nearly as many
Well,
as
that
Christmas
that
songs.
that aforementioned Bare Naked Ladies album has at least two
Yeah,
Hanukkah songs,
yeah,
right? One of Hanukkah, Oh Hanukkah, Come Light the Menorah.
that's a classic. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, and I forget I think the other one might be an original. I
yeah.
can't remember exactly. But I've been listening now that I guess since we're talking about it, let me put in a plug. I've been listening to it's never too early to start. Uh, Underrated is the Charlie Pride Christmas album, Christmas in My Hometown. I grew up listening to that. I listen to it every year, and I've been listening to who is this guy? James. Let's see what this is. Cullum, Cullum.
Don't
It's sort
know.
of like a Harry Connick Jr. kind of thing, Bill, but
Okay,
I
all
think
right.
better.
If people have recommendations for good holiday music that's come out in the last 10 years, I definitely want to hear it. I have certain things that are my favorites, but my pop culture knowledge, degrades over time. Uh, and Spotify, getting recommendations is sort of helpful, but still, like, there's more good Christmas songs and Hanukkah songs, but still, like most Christmas songs are bad. You have to dig to find the good ones. Uh, and so I really love the relatively recent version of "Must Be Santa" by Bob Dylan. Um, the uh, I never liked the SNL "Christmas Time Is Here" song. That's not the exact name of it. But one of the guys in the Strokes did a version of it, which is
Well,
fantastic.
that's interesting.
Um, Julian Casablancas, I think his name is. Um, and there's woman I came across who goes by Emmy the Great, who put out like a small holiday album, and there's a song called Zombie Christmas, which is fantastic.
Fonzie Christmas?
Zombie Christmas. Or we could go on for a long
We
time,
could
Matt,
go
but
on, but
I wish it was Christmas today. That's the SNL song.
Christmas today.
I wish it was Christmas today.
But we'll have to. I've already got my funny hat picked out for our Christmas episode this year, Bill. Make sure you've got a Santa hat or an elf hat or something.
I think I need to get a good ugly Christmas sweater, but I don't have one yet.
I need another one because I've worn the same one over and over. So we shall work on that. We're a couple weeks out, but I guess we should talk about last night's debate.
You
What
watched
do
it
you
all the
think?
way through?
I watched the whole thing because I had to write about it. So I watched the whole thing. Of course, I started writing. You know how it goes, Bill. If you're in the industry, an hour and a half in, I kind of had my column take, and at that point, I was writing it with one eye and watching the debate with the other. But yeah, I basically had to watch the whole thing. I would say pretty. I mean, if
Anything
we're just
happened in the
judging,
last 30 minutes that that blew up your take?
that's what you're hoping that doesn't happen, and actually, it sort of confirmed my take, I think. But that's the fear. It's sort of like being a sports writer.
Right.
The other team comes from behind and wins at last minute. Your entire columns is toast. But that's happened to me once or twice in my life. Most of the time, your take holds, and it did. And my take was that let me tell you the story because it's
Okay.
premised on my podcast. I interviewed our friend Josh Krausar from Jewish Insider, formerly National Journal, formerly Axios. And I interviewed him this week on my podcast. We had a really good talk about Israel, but also about kind of the Republican primary process. And he was like, look, everyone's going to be coming for Nikki Haley. DeSantis wants to take her down because of Iowa. Christie wants to take her down because of New Hampshire. And I was like, wow, if Christie's sort of, if his big contribution to the 2024 race is destroying Nikki Haley, that would be a big deal, right? Because obviously he did that to Rubio.
Right.
I thought the whole point of him running this time was to stop Trump, not the person who might stop Trump or who possibly could stop Trump. So I said, I don't think that's going to happen. I think he may run interference for her. And that's really what happened. To me, the story was that Nikki Haley had kind of a bad night, but she survived thanks to Chris Christie, who I think kind of played a white knight and saved her, I think, a couple times, defended her, and went after Ramaswamy and DeSantis.
I mean, I feel like all these debates are the winner is who beats up Ramaswamy, because who is just a target-rich environment because he's such a absolute obnoxious bore, and who is not the actual obstacle to becoming the Republican presidential nominee. So, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I mean, I didn't see the whole thing start to finish. I only caught highlights. But I agree with you. Haley survives, but she needs to do more than survive. She needs to really, draw a straight flush if she's actually going to win a early contest. She is still very far behind with not that much time on the clock. And I'm not saying other things can't happen, theoretically, that could light a fresh spark, but she's gone as far as she had because of good debate performances, which are largely premised on taking shots of Vivek Ramaswamy. And you need a second act. And I don't see where that second act is, quite frankly. I mean, that's the part of my skepticism about Haley is that I just don't think she's that good a candidate at the end of the day. She's kind of hollow. She's twisting the wind, finger in the wind. And I saw her first TV ad. It was pretty meh. She's a meh candidate. There's an argument that better mad candidate than like a psycho dictator. Uh, but it's hard to see how you get from point A to point B and get past that psycho dictator being kind of meh.
Yeah, I feel like there's something there that she's good and she's almost great, but never doesn't quite like last night would have been the opportunity if she had shown up and blown the doors off. And instead, it seemed like she was trying to almost rose garden her way. It's like, come on, you're down by
She,
I
she,
don't know how many points to Donald Trump.
she debated like a front runner,
Yes,
but she's not a front runner. She's a front
correct.
runner among those on the stage. That's
And not even, but even if you assume that Donald Trump doesn't exist, she's still not that far ahead.
right.
She shouldn't be playing a prevent defense, as they say.
I mean, this
And
is this is the
and the
NIT we're watching, not the NCAA, not March Madness. So
yeah.
she needs to
So
find a way
I
to get into the actual big show, and she still hasn't really done that yet.
Yeah, I think she needed to bring it and she didn't. And frankly, if Christie hadn't been there, it could have been a devastating night for her. Or she would have had to have either she would have gotten destroyed and beat up and humiliated, or maybe if he wasn't there, she would have had to have defended herself and it would have risen to the occasion. I don't know, but I think Christie really kind of saved her bacon. And this tells me something interesting about Christie because I think he's going to endorse her. I mean, if we're, who knows? But
Mhm.
I think that that's the trajectory that we're on. That Christie, the question I always had about him is when push comes to shove, is he going to prioritize stopping Trump, even if that means making a sacrifice um, and putting his own personal political ambitions aside, or will he destroy DeSantis or Haley in order to perpetuate his campaign? Will he do the noble sacrificial thing? And then now, based on last night, I think that that's the path he's on. And
Well, if he was to endorse
I
Haley,
think Haley gets his votes obviously if he drops out and endorses her.
the logical time to do it would be after Iowa, before New Hampshire. Generate like a big buzz in that late run up. Uh, and there's obvious logic to doing that. He's not going to be the nominee. If he genuinely wants to stop Donald, I mean, I heard him on CNN the other day saying, someone was making the argument, you're holding Haley back, your votes would go to her, she's ahead of you. Um, why wouldn't, if you want to stop Trump, wouldn't you close ranks? And he has this kind of convoluted answer, like, "Oh, voters don't think this way. We're always going to go in there and do our best." And blah, blah, blah. I'm not getting it exactly right, but it was a unsatisfying and illogical response to dance around what's obvious, which is he's dividing anti-Trump votes. So if he genuinely wants to give someone the best chance of stopping Trump, that's what he would do.
Yeah.
And until then, he's going to be bombastic Chris Christie and try to hog them as much spotlight as he can for himself.
Yeah, and I think the key is, I mean, I'm glad he didn't drop out before last night. I think he did a service to Nikki Haley and to the never Trump conservative cause by being on that stage. So I think you're absolutely right about the timing, but there could be a temptation if Christie. It's possible that Christie could be poised to think he can win New
Mhm.
Hampshire
Mhm.
coming out of Iowa. I don't think he's going to perform well in Iowa, but New Hampshire they can be contrarian. They don't want to rubber stamp Iowa. And Christie's sort of bombastic style could play well in the live free or die state. So, will he make the sacrifice if he thinks he has a shot to actually win?
Mhm.
In
Well, it's also possible that Haley's peaked. I mean, again, she's had a relatively decent run, but she's only gained like 5 points nationally since September, about 5 points in Iowa. The biggest jump is New Hampshire. I think it's more like 15, but still, I think below 20 in the average. Uh, and if she doesn't have something else to show, that would allow that momentum to continue. Maybe it starts to fizzle out a bit, and Christie says, "Why am I trying to prop her up? She's going in the wrong direction now." So,
Yeah. But
she needs to earn that endorsement.
the problem with that, you may be right about Nikki Haley, but the problem is Christie has no second act, right?
Oh,
Because
Christie,
so
all of
first of
Christie's
all,
cards are on the table. You know who
yeah,
Christie is.
well, he has to win New Hampshire, but even if he wins New Hampshire, see if Haley wins New Hampshire, she could potentially parlay that into South Carolina into something bigger. If Christie wins New Hampshire, I think it's not transferable. It's not scalable. The reason he will have won is A, because New Hampshire is contrarian,
Yeah.
B, because in New Hampshire, independents
Yep.
or
New
undeclared can
Hampshire
show up
is
and
not
vote.
a bellwether to anything. The notion that New Hampshire picks presidents is completely farcical, and it only gives you a short burst of media coverage. Which, if you have other attributes that play in other states,
Right.
you can string something together.
And so with Nikki Haley, number one, she was governor of South Carolina. Number two, she's the best person to beat Joe Biden, according to the polls.
According to
Number,
the polls today, I mean,
yeah.
I don't think it's a slam dunk argument, but go ahead.
Number three, unlike Christie, I think she's got broader appeal within the Republican Party in a closed primary. Christie is wildly unpopular among Republicans. Um, Nikki Haley, as of now, has the ability, I think, to attract kind of suburban soccer moms, but also um, sort of standard. They don't hate Nikki yet
Well,
the way they hate
yet, I mean,
Christie.
she's had a relatively good run with nobody really laying into her. So, she's been able to be all things to all people and get some traction with people who are more suburbanite, who don't want Trump's obnoxiousness. But you could very easily see a concentrated carpet bombing attack on Nikki Haley, where she no longer seems all that pristine and all that broadly appealing.
Well, we saw some of that last night with
Well,
Vivek
but Vivek
Ramaswamy.
is not even. But he's not even the best. His attacks are lame. Trump is generally pretty good at finding your weak spot and hammering it. Vivek is you're stupid and don't know where Israel is on a map. That's not a plausible argument. She's a freaking UN ambassador, numbnuts. That's the best charge of Haley is that she's a soulless, empty vessel. That she's hollow inside and doesn't really stand for anything. Not that she's stupid. So I don't think Vivek really found the weak spot on her, which is why Christie could be like, "Get the hell out of here! Why are you even on this stage? You don't really belong here." But if Trump went in after her hard, I think he could do some real damage.
And he will. It'll be worse than bird brain
Yeah.
if she keeps, if she makes, gains. And again, we should reiterate the bets that we made last week. You say Trump's going to win Iowa and New Hampshire.
Right.
I say Trump will lose one of the two. So that's a bet that is actually quantifiable. The other one is impossible for us to know ever who's right. You think there's less than a 1% chance that somebody other than Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee in 2024. I
Right.
give Trump an 80% likelihood,
So
meaning there's
you get through the Nate Silver. I said it was 80%. I mean, I wasn't saying he wasn't going to be the nominee.
well, that's what I said. It's going to be impossible to quantify or have any sort of accountability. But that's suffice it to say, I am much more bullish on the field than you are.
Now, when we talked last, we haven't talked about DeSantis much yet. So I want to hear your take about DeSantis' debate performance. So maybe weave that in. But we don't have a lot of polling. I actually checked this morning. We have about half the number of polls in Iowa and New Hampshire in this Republican contest versus 8 years ago. And in Iowa, there was only one poll in November. There's two polls in October. I'm sorry, two in October, two in November, and one that just came out from Trafalgar yesterday that was sampled in early December. Trafalgar had one of the November ones too. So comparing those two Trafalgar polls. I know Trafalgar is not exactly the best polling operation, but this is a Republican contest, not a general election where they're putting their thumb in the scale for the Republican. Um, and between these two polls, as we talked about last show, DeSantis got that Vanderplatz endorsement, the big Christian evangelical kingpin, whose endorsements have often propelled winners in the Iowa caucus. In November in Trafalgar, it was Trump 44, DeSantis 18, Haley 15. Tim Scott was still in the race at that point at 9. In December, it's Trump 45. So he gained 1. DeSantis 22, he gained 4. And Haley 19, she gained 4. So I look at that and I say, I don't see a whole lot of significant movement here. But you may look at it and say, hey, DeSantis got 4 points after that Vanderplatz endorsement. Maybe this is the beginning to bigger and better things.
No, I don't really want to rehash last week's debate. I think it comes down to, do you believe the polls and do you believe things change and break late? That's the fundamental question. So, but to your point about DeSantis, he's just not good at this. I think we know that. We've seen enough.
You're unimpressed with his debate performance last night?
Yeah. I mean, I just don't. I mean, I think he probably did maybe his best debate, but it's still bad. It's just he's just not good at it, and I
He's
don't
not
think
good
he has.
on the stage with other Republicans. Like his best venue is a press conference in Florida where he's yelling at reporters.
Yeah.
Like he's very comfortable in that venue. But like drawing distinctions between fellow Republicans, he doesn't know how to do that well.
I completely agree. I think that in Florida, they were kind of guilty of almost like a protectionist policy where they controlled the venue. He had the physical environment that he wanted. He
owned the microphone.
Yeah. So I think that, like, in a way, though, it's like you're in the veal pen. You know what I mean? Like, he had created an environment where he couldn't lose, where he couldn't fail, in Florida, and I think that maybe created a false sense of security, and it definitely worked as long as he was in that environment, but it didn't prepare him for running for president. It reminds me a little bit of back when I was a conservative blogger and people thought bloggers were really influential and really important, I spent a lot of time around Texas Governor Rick Perry. In fact, I went shooting with him on 2 different occasions. And it wasn't just me, it was a handful of us.
How's your aim?
That was not bad. I've assigned, I don't even know what it's called, Bill. Target, I guess, or
skeet shooting, not game hunting.
He signed it. No, one time we went clay pigeon shooting, and one time it was at a firing range. But I got him to sign one of the targets from the firing range, and I think it said "Shoot straight, stay conservative, Rick Perry." So I still have that. But Rick Perry, I was bullish on him because he was so cool to hang out with. If you're at like a barbecue restaurant or like a firing range, like he was super fun and awesome and smart and like charismatic. And so I was really like, this guy's going to like be amazing. This guy's going to like, be the next, at least George W. Bush. Mm-hmm. And then he gets on the debate stage and it all falls apart. And it took me a while to figure out, like, wait a second. I was always around him in Texas and we were always eating barbecue and shooting guns. And as long as we were doing that, he was amazing. But that's not what running for president is. So,
yeah. I mean, some of that, there's that part of it. But there's plenty of debates that don't move the needle. But if you're going to break out somehow, it's usually there, and it requires a very fine dance where you have to appeal to Republicans while attacking other Republicans, and that's tricky.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me how people have different skill sets. Like Ron DeSantis is obviously very smart in a certain way. And I think he actually looked at COVID data charts and study. Like, I think he's analytical and he went to Ivy League schools. I mean, he's managed to get elected to Congress, managed to become governor of Florida. Like, he's not dumb. Um, but he just is a horrible, horrible debater. He cannot do it. It is not his skill set. I mean, I think about myself. Like, I sometimes have a hard time recalling the exact word, like target, for example, that I struggled with a second ago. As a writer, you don't see that. I'm writing, and it'll come to me. You only see the final product, and I just think people's brains work differently, and people have different skill sets. Rick Perry, amazing at the firing range, horrible at 9 o'clock at night on the debate stage. By the way, I was always with him at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon too.
Well, so let me ask you, Matt, because your bet is Trump loses one of the first two states.
I do believe that will happen.
So that means, correct me if I'm wrong, either DeSantis wins Iowa, or Haley wins New Hampshire, right? You're not assuming Haley wins Iowa, correct?
No, I think Trump. If I had to extend my bet,
it's not part of the bet. We won't be held
you won't
to
hold me to it, but I think Trump will win Iowa and lose New Hampshire. And I think that's partly because New Hampshire will not want to rubber stamp Iowa. And I think it's also partly because independents and unaffiliated voters will show up and vote for someone else other than Trump. So that is my bet. I think Trump wins Iowa, loses New Hampshire. And I think there's a chance that if Haley is the one, right now it looks like she would be probably, especially if Christie were to endorse her, that could light a spark. And there's going to be a moment, a possibility. I still think it's a long shot, but I think that is the hope at this point.
Okay. You want to shift gears?
Does that sound totally crazy to you, or?
I mean, look,
I mean, by the way, Joe Trippi, I interviewed on my podcast this week as well. He puts it at 30%.
Really?
He's more bullish than I am. And I think
on Haley specifically?
No, just on a non-Trump candidate. He puts it at 30%. And I don't want to misquote him, but I believe it's safe to say he agreed with me that Trump will lose at least one of the first two states.
Well, look, in 2020, I made a case that Biden could lose Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and still win South Carolina and become the nominee, which is what I mean. I don't like write in blood, but I had an exchange with Steve Kornacki on Twitter back then where I sort of mapped out why that was plausible.
It seemed implausible. That seemed implausible. I mean, in fact, Bill, I was telling Democrats for a year, go with Biden. Biden can win. Biden can beat Trump. Go with Biden. But after Biden lost Iowa and New Hampshire, I'm going to admit there was a point where I'm like, I think I have a column out there. Like, it's Amy Klobuchar or bust. Everyone needs to just go in for Amy Klobuchar. It's not a good look, Bill, but that was out of desperation.
But my case was based on both some history and the demographics of the states. So I knew enough of the history to know that these states don't just blindly follow one another. The demographics of Iowa and New Hampshire have no bearing on what Southerners do or what Southern African Americans do. And the kind of races that Bernie, Buttigieg were running weren't getting any traction in South Carolina, and Biden still had currency there. So he had to do well enough in Nevada, where he came in second, if I remember correctly, that Clyburn didn't peel off and came in with the endorsement, and Biden was able to resurrect himself. But there was evidence in past primaries, even though the order of the states was different. There's other examples of Democratic candidates that have northern white college educated support hitting a brick wall when they got to the South. And so I could see how that could behoove, Joe Biden in this instance. I don't see, even if, and I don't think it's going to happen, even if Haley wins New Hampshire, where, as you point out, you got a weird mix of independents there that make it unique. Even if she wins her home state of South Carolina, how does that translate into all the other states when we have seen that Trump has very broad support nationally? That's not just superficial name ID, but like real rock hard diehards. The diehard doesn't get him to 50, but certainly gets him well over 30.
Yeah.
And it's not too hard to get into the 40s after that, which is generally what you need in these contests.
Well, I think that's why this is a magical thinking. It's my year of magical thinking. I think what has to happen is two things. One, the sense that Donald Trump could be in legal peril and or will lose to Joe Biden. Haley is a better matchup against Biden for a variety of reasons. That has to be part of the story. And then I think the other part of the story is, and I've talked about this before, I just always think of it in the movie Rocky IV, when Rocky's in Russia and he's fighting he's fighting Dolph Lundgren, Ivan Drago. And I always remember there's this part where the announcer's like, he's cut, the Russian's cut, and it's a bad cut. It's like the first time anyone has drawn blood. If Haley wins New Hampshire, wins South Carolina, builds momentum, how much of the support of Trump around the country and within the Republican Party, how much of the support of him is like a bandwagon effect premised on he's going to win anyway, he's the incumbent, versus no, we genuinely love this guy, he is our guy. That
in 2016, I thought that Trump losing Iowa would be it. That the whole thing was based on puffery, notions of him being the strongest at all the times. And
you got to remember, Ted Cruz stole that election, Bill.
What's the thing? Trump's going to say these things if he loses these states. The establishment out to get me, the media is out to get me. I'm going to sue. Who knows what he's going to say? He's not going to say, "Boo-hoo me, I lost." He's going to say everything's rigged. So we learned in 2016 that he had some diehard support that was not rattled when he lost a state or two. So I'm not convinced that Haley winning in a couple of idiosyncratic contests is going to be enough. I'm not convinced that legal jeopardy is going to be the thread because of everything that's happened the past year, where every indictment, gooses his numbers. Even getting humiliated in a fraud trial, his numbers could go up. And the electability question is not working in Haley's favor because, as it stands, Trump beats Biden in polls. So it's hard to argue that you need to abandon Trump. If Trump was losing by 10 and Haley was winning by 5, then maybe, but that's not what's happening right now. And it may well be that Trump is being his price is overinflated in these polls right now because Biden is seeing a rough patch with younger voters in the wake of what's happening in the Middle East, and that will eventually rebound. But it's all hypothetical when the numbers you're staring at right now saying Trump's going to win. So it's hard to pull people away on an electability argument. So there's so much has to go her way that isn't going her way right now.
No, I totally agree. You say you're not convinced. I'm not convinced either. In fact, I think it's 80% likely that it won't happen, but I think there's a chance. And as they say, we'll have to, as I think Trump says, or used to say a lot, we'll have to see how this plays out. He used to say that a lot. I think he used to say that a lot. But we will.
So I have a column up at the Washington Monthly today, totally different topic. I don't know if you're following. It hasn't gotten a whole lot of media attention, but the main surveillance program, a warrantless surveillance program called Section 702.
Yeah, Bill, just for those who don't know, I wrote my college dissertation on Section 702. I could at length Expound on this. But I don't want to overshadow you, so let you explain this.
Well, some people, who aren't too young might remember in the Bush years post 9/11, Bush was engaging in warrantless wiretapping without clear legal grounding. And when that was uncovered, uh, Congress passed a law that retroactively made it okay. And this was a controversy for Barack Obama if he was going to, support this or not. And even though he had criticisms about it, if I remember correctly, at the end of the day, he voted for the bill. I think he voted for an amendment in one way, then voted for a final bill that gave Bush the authority. One of the first examples of showing that Obama was not going to be some purist ideologue. So it's been law since 2004. And essentially, it allows the intelligence agencies to target foreign actors and their communications, phone, email, and such, capturing the actual content of the communications, even if the foreign target is talking to somebody in America. You can't target an American. If you get information about an American, there's a lot of rules surrounding what you can do with that. But you are allowed to capture that communication. And every time this program is up to be reauthorized, it's always controversial. A lot of the Edward Snowden leaks were around this program. I wrote at the time that Snowden was being disingenuous and dishonest about characterizing what we knew about the program, suggesting that even the governmental review showed that it wasn't effective in stopping terrorism, when in fact it said the exact opposite. He was conflating two different programs when he said that. So there's evidence in these reviews that this was back in 2013, 2014, that 53 successful counterterror operations used Section 702 data, over 100 terrorism-related arrests. This is talking 10 years ago. And then since then, it's become even more essential to the intelligence apparatus. So more than half of the information in the president's daily brief comes from Section 702 garnered information. It's not just counterterrorism, it's helping with fentanyl interdiction, for example. So it's all these things that conservatives say they want. They want secure borders. They want to be protected from outside threats. And before, all the criticism about this program was coming from like left-leaning civil libertarians like Snowden and Glenn Greenwald, ACLU. In the Trump era, where Trump has fanned the flames against the deep state, how the FBI is out to get him. Some people on the far right say abolish the FBI. FBI has, Section 702 authorities here. And in particular, they can query Section 702 data. And there's been some instances where they've done inappropriate queries. They've queried American subjects when they shouldn't have. And the folks who hate the program say, aha, the FBI is out of control. Whereas the actual reviews say they weren't like trying to blackmail somebody. They weren't trying to humiliate someone for their sexual preferences. They just had a misunderstanding of the rules surrounding queries. And so we didn't get tied up the compliance. So the FBI director said, we have done these reforms to tie up the queries. So the program is due to expire this month. And the question is, should we have some kind of reform around the program? And if so, how extensive? And you have in the Senate, Mark Warner and Marco Rubio, bipartisan, the two top people on the Intelligence Committee. They have a proposal. It has some limitations on the FBI queries, but it doesn't require warrants. I mean, that's the biggest thing. Do you need a warrant to collect the data or search the data? Uh, Warren and Rubio do not insist on warrants. Uh, on the House side, the House Intelligence Chair, Turner, I think it's Mike Turner, his bill is more like Warner Rubio's. I think some very minimal warrant requirement, but generally speaking, not. Uh, the Judiciary Chair is Jim Jordan, much more of a Trumper, America First type. He wants a broad warrant requirement for Section 702. He has Andy Biggs, who's one of the people who ousted McCarthy, who won the motion to vacate. But he has some people on the left, like Jerry Nadler, for example. I believe Pramila Jayapal is on that bill. So just yesterday, Judiciary passed the warrant bill in like a 35-2 vote, but the Intelligence Committee in the House is about to push forth their other bill, which competes. Where's Mike Johnson in all this? He isn't saying which approach he supports. And the time's ticking to actually make sure this program doesn't lapse altogether at the end of the year. So Tuesday, there's reporting that Johnson said, because so every year we pass a defense budget bill. It's called the NDAA. You got to pass it every year, or else defense doesn't have any money. So
again, of course, I know all this, but for the sake of the listener, we'll go along with it.
Right. So some people are like, let's just tack on a stopgap on this must-pass bill, so we don't like lose our ability to collect intelligence on terrorists all of a sudden. Johnson says on Tuesday, nope, I'm not going to put this on the NDAA. And Andy Biggs is like, hooray for Mike Johnson. This shouldn't be tucked into some other bill. We shouldn't pass this without the chance to have amendments, to have changes. Very next day, Wednesday, comes out, oh, forget what I said before. We're going to put it on the NDAA till April. So it extends till April. So he still isn't adjudicating what they should do after that point, but presumably we're not going to have a lapse in the authority. From my perspective, I support the program. I think it's been proven to not be a threat to civil liberties, and it's proven effective. So it should be maintained. And so, on one hand, good for Mike Johnson that he didn't jeopardize the program in the short run. But I'm not really impressed with the process here. And it creates, the column that I wrote for the monthly was more about the conservatives who are against this program, how hypocritical it is to be putting so much attention on the border crisis to the point where they're going to hold up Ukraine aid unless there's a border fix. But when it comes to, the FBI director just this week testified saying there are blinking lights everywhere. The threat level has gone up to a whole nother level since October 7th. Terrorist organizations are actively talking about attacks on America. You say you care about the border, and you want to throw a wrench into the main intelligence program that's protecting us? Maybe the border is not really what you care about, if that's your stance. That's one of my bigger points. But I also have in the newsletter my question about Mike Johnson. Are you really up to the task to navigate this issue and others? I get that your caucus is a mess. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not. But you are not the most experienced person to lead this crew, and the way you're handling things is very improvised, zigzag, weak leadership. He's got to deal with the 702 problem. He's got to deal with keeping the government open. He's got to deal with Ukraine aid. My confidence level in Mike Johnson is not high.
No, I agree. I think it's interesting, though. It'll be interesting to find out who is Mike Johnson. Is he a mainstream conservative? Well, is he like a Christian conservative that could have existed 20 years ago who has to play MAGA to survive? Or is he a MAGA guy? And I don't think we know that yet, but it seems like he has a lot of traditional conservative instincts.
Yeah, I think he's so far he's behaved more like Kevin McCarthy than people might have thought. He kept the government open with a stopgap. He's keeping 702 going without insisting on changes imminently. Like he is disappointing the far right, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was livid yesterday about this defense. Well, not just in the 702, but also they didn't put in an anti-abortion provision and anti-transgender stuff. There's things that they wanted that they didn't get. So Mike Johnson, I think, is trying to behave like a governing conservative, not a burn it down conservative. So in that sense, I give him, two out of three cheers. I just don't know if he really has figured out how to keep this going. If he has the spine to not just kick the can down the road, but actually make some calls
Well,
to solve these problems.
in fairness to Mike Johnson, I don't know if anyone could perform this job that he's been handed. And now with George Santos out and Kevin McCarthy is resigning.
Yep.
I think Republicans are going to have a 1-seat majority
No,
at
it's
the end
not.
of the year.
It's not that bad. I
It's
think
bad.
I think it goes down because I think at full strength, I believe it's 222 to 213. So if everybody votes, you need 218. If no one's voting present, everyone's voting yay or nay. You need 218 versus 217 to win a vote. So Republicans could lose 4 when they're at full strength. But if they have 2 vacancies and it's 220 to 213, and now your magic number in a body of 433, your magic number is 217, not 218. You could lose 3 Republicans and win a 217 to 216 vote, but you can't lose 4. So I
But are
think they
you
only go
counting when
down.
McCarthy leaves?
Correct, because
Okay.
Santos and McCarthy are your 2
So
vacancies.
they could lose 3.
I think they can. I think on a vote where everybody votes, they can
I
lose
think
3.
now, as of today, they can only lose 3,
Well,
which means
because Santos is gone, so you're at 434 in the House with a 221 to 213 margin. So if you lose 3, you're at 218 versus 216. You lose 4, it's 217 tie, which is a loss. So
I was told
yes.
there'd be no math in this, but
So
I'll
you're
take your word. I'll take your word for it. But whether
Well,
it's
I'm agreeing with you. Where you're so
yeah,
the going down one more with McCarthy doesn't change the math. It's still
okay,
you can't lose more than 3.
okay, okay, I got you. Okay, still difficult, difficult to herd these cats and to get anything done. And these, contrarian or just downright ornery, weird coalition that you have to keep stitched together. So I don't envy him, and I don't know. You very well may be right that Johnson is not prepared for this. He doesn't have the experience for this. He may not. He may not have the backbone for this. But I just don't know how anyone could be successful in this job at this moment.
I mean, what I hate to go back, several shows. What should have happened was a Democrat stuck by McCarthy, and you sideline the small faction of nihilists, and you do these basic things with bipartisan votes out in the open.
Yeah.
Instead, we have to go through extra levels of kabuki because no one can just acknowledge that this is the way that governing is going to work in this particular narrowly divided Congress.
They mocked us. They hated us, but that's what we said, Bill. You and I were a united front on that one.
And so
That's
maybe Johnson can handle like super duper kabuki and get to the same place at the end of the day. But one, we just don't know if he can keep those balls in the air. And 2, it's going to be very harrowing over the next several months because of the uncertainty of it all.
indeed. Well, we're about out of time, Bill. But if it's cool with you, I'd like to just quickly mention a column I wrote this week
Oh yes,
and get your take on it. We don't
yeah.
have to expound on it too much, but I wrote a column saying, speaking of Mike Johnson, Mike Johnson said, I think we got the votes to begin an impeachment inquiry on Joe Biden. To which I say, Joe Biden should be like, Christmas came early. Thank you. Please throw me in that briar patch.
Yeah.
I think that the best thing that could happen to Joe Biden would be if Republicans impeached him. This is granted, this is a crazy thing to say, but we live in crazy times, right? What happens if Joe Biden's real problem right now is that he's kind of boring and he's having a hard time keeping his coalition together. He's not even that popular among Democrats. Well, nothing in the modern era, nothing galvanizes your base better than the sense that you are being attacked. And so we even saw it happen with Bill Clinton, and I think we saw it happen with Donald Trump, where it is not what it used to be, and especially if it is perceived as being overwrought. I think that Biden could benefit from a good old fashioned impeachment. What say you?
Oh, I generally agree. Certainly, if I was a Republican and I had Biden, job approval down to 40 or below, depending on what poll you look at. Trump beating him by a couple points in the average, which would presumably win him an electoral college victory. Biden's base demoralized, young voters peeling off because they're mad about the Middle East, possibly losing the Arab vote in Michigan. I would not tempt fate by doing something that would take all those other issues off the front page and create a rallying point for the Democratic base to unite around. That makes no political sense. So there's no upside to it. You're not going to impeach and convict. If you did, you get Kamala, which may not necessarily. Maybe you think she's beatable, but it would give her a chance to be the incumbent for several months. So I don't know if that would be wise. But
But think of the pressure this would put on moderate Republicans too. I mean, I think there's 17 Republicans who represent Biden districts. Imagine the Republican Party forcing 17 or 15, however many you would need, 15 Republicans representing Biden districts to vote for impeachment, or not, or don't vote, or vote against it. Maybe even worse for them.
There's no political calculation that justifies putting your most vulnerable House members, your majority makers, in that kind of political vice where they have to choose between the base and the middle. There's no argument that this is going to galvanize swing voters nationally against Biden when you don't have the goods. I mean, if you had the goods, if you had an obvious case of corruption to put forth to the public, then maybe you'd say, I have a political obligation, what have you, but they don't even have that.
We've seen the dress, the blue dress or whatever. We've had the smoking gun. It still might backfire.
This is solely the only justification for it is a sop to the hard right and hope that pacifies them enough so you can do things like keep the government open, fund Ukraine, and pass 702. That's the only reason to do it.
I think Mike Johnson.
Mike Johnson.
I haven't got. Wasn't there a runner named Mike Johnson? Anyway, I still don't know who this guy is. I still have to Google him to get to the bottom of some of this stuff. But Mike Johnson, I think he's just feigning this. I don't think he's really going to try to impeach Biden. I think he has to do. I think this is just performative. I don't think he's really going to.
Well, the next step is an impeachment inquiry vote, not an impeachment vote.
Right. In fairness, I agree, but what do you do? Do you start the inquiry and then decide that he's not impeachable, that you're not going to go forward? Like, isn't that like an exoneration?
Well, I mean, look, I'm not saying this is smart, but typically you go impeachment inquiry when you're pretty sure you got the goods.
Yeah.
And you just got to sort of finish the job before
and
you
this
do
would
the formal
presumably
vote.
Give you more leverage to do a deeper investigation or to get subpoenas. There must be some benefit to the official inquiry where you can gather more data.
I mean, you have subpoena power already. I don't really think it gives you that much substantively. I think it's more there's a gravity to it, but I don't think it really changes so much as far what you actually can, what or how you investigate. They've done a fair amount of investigation, and they don't have squat. They do not have squat right now. Everything they hold up to the light, falls apart. So uh, it feels more like a going through the motions to try to tell the Freedom Caucus types, we're moving the ball forward. We're doing stuff. We got to see what we can get, but we're moving the ball forward. And look, it may be that Johnson says, okay, we did this, and now we have to have the impeachment vote. But your Biden district Republicans, others might say, doesn't mean I have to play along. It doesn't mean I have to actually go forth with the actual impeachment. And if you have the vote, you go to your Taylor Greens and your Boeberts and your Biggs and your Gates and say, look, what can I do? I put it on the floor. I did what you wanted me to do. Don't blame me if these guys didn't vote for it. If that's what it takes to get them to shut up so they don't push a motion to vacate, I could. That's the only logical explanation I have. And of course, they want to do the same thing with Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, for his handling of the border, which there also, there's no argument that he did something illegal or corrupt. They just don't like his policies, which is not the basis for impeachment, but they don't want to hear that. So he may have to push for on that front too, just to get him to be pacified.
Well, I'm not sure we learned much. I'm not sure we accomplished much, but it's always good to talk to you, Bill Scher.
As the mantra on Seinfeld was, no learning, no hugging.
It's no cheers. Let's just say that. Follow us on Twitter at DMZ Show. Support us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Bill Scher. Patreon.com/Matt Lewis. What else?
I got you check my stuff out at the Washington Monthly, the column, the newsletter. You get signed for the email at thewashingtonmonthly.com. You can sign up on Substack, washingtonmonthly.substack.com. And happy Hanukkah, Matt.
You got it, man. Happy Hanukkah. And we will see you back here in the DMZ next week.
Take care.